Visions of the Black Heaven, Chapter 14. They stepped into the room. By the fireplace lay the biggest bearskin rug they had ever seen. Not that Melody or Lynette had ever seen a real bearskin rug. It was still very large. The fireplace was made of white limestone. Lynette gently brushed her hand on the stone. It was smooth, yet had a grainy feel. It appeared that the limestone had been polished, and the limestone looked like a type of quartz crystal. The fire pit was at least 7 feet wide, 6 feet tall, and 7 feet deep. Inside the fireplace pit was made in the form of a large half-moon arch, tall and wide enough for a man to walk into. The stones fit so well together, no seams showed. What caught Lynette's attention was the dome front of the pit had layers of soot on the dome. Yet the back of the dome was clean and showed no signs of usage. How could that be? The chimney opening was in back. There should be more soot in the rear of the dome, not less. Lynette wondered. Things just don't work that way. The outer edge of the fireplace extended about 6 inches from the rest of the wall, and the limestone had sparkling effect when the light shone on it. On the outside end of the blocks, facing into the room, shone a metal insignia molded into the limestone, what looked like a planet, and a strange language written under it. The keystone was larger. It looked to be about 4 feet on top, 3 feet on bottom, creating a wedge, and fit in the arch so well that none of the blocks appeared to have any mortar holding them together. The keystone had a larger symbol, a solar system. Each planet rotated around a central planet like our sun. There was a single word under the solar system. Lynette looked at the symbols and the words. She had never seen this type of metal before. The letters of the language almost looked like something she had seen in the book called the Voynich Manuscript. The base of the fireplace went from the front of the room to the back wall, and what Melody estimated to be about 25 feet long. That was more amazing was the inside end of the fireplace seemed to be molded right into the mountain, as if the two were fused together to form one. Lynette had never seen anything like this before. The walls on the other side of the fireplace were the same color as the outside of the house. Not a limestone yellow or a granite gray. Melody was not sure what kind of stone it was. She was sure she had never seen it before. They stood back and saw 2 stained glass windows on either side of the fireplace. Each window had to be at least 10 feet tall and 5 feet wide. The stained glass depicted different colors of geometric figures, which Lynette thought she recognized. Lynette looked at Melody. I don't understand this thing with the stained glass windows. Notice there are no clear windows and no mirrors either. Melody nodded her head, agreeing. Now Melody looked at Lynette with a perplexed look in her face. Does this room look bigger than it should? Lynette nodded her head and agreed. The floor was made of a smooth, polished stone, similar to that of the walls. The floor had seams which showed it was made in segments, but the seams fit so close that the seams were virtually invisible. The floor radiated a comfortable warmth that puzzled Lynette. She was not sure where the heat could possibly have come from. In the center of the room was a wooden table with 4 wooden chairs. The craftsmanship was wonderful. No one had ever seen the style of chairs. A simple yet elegant design. Lynette had never seen the type of wood. A very light wood with extremely dark ring grain. On the other side of the room were stone-covered counters with open-face cupboards under the countertop. In the center of the counter was a stone sink with a small stream of fresh bubbling water flowing from a stone pipe into the sink. With a stone pipe that went from the bottom of the sink into the floor. Above the sink and counter were 2 more stained glass windows. Each window was about 5 feet high and 5 feet wide, with different multicolored geometric-looking figures. At the back of the room, there were 3 large bookcases that were built from the floor to the ceiling and the same kind of wood the table and chairs seemed to be made of. Lynette watched as Melody touched the bookcases, looking at different books. There were classics from Shakespeare, Melville, Tolstoy, Kipling, Descartes, Spinoza, Kant, Locke. Also, there were books on every kind of science Melody could think of: astrology, magnetism, biology, botany, chemistry, geomorphology. Melody touched the books on the shelves without looking at the titles. Each book a journal of different notes, observations, discoveries, thoughts made by Duke's grandfather over the years. To the right of the bookcases, they saw an old postmaster's desk with numerous drawers and shelves. Each shelf was full of sheets of paper with notes and diagrams. To the left of the desk was a large wooden chest with a lock similar to the lock on the front door. It had 2 keyholes. To the left of the chest was a set of stairs that led to the loft, which overlooked the main room. The loft seemed to be built right into the mountain. Duke and Thor walked into the cabin with arms full of firewood. Everyone watched as Duke started to make a fire. As the fire grew, Melody looked at Duke and said, "Your grandfather was an amazing man. How could one man do all this by himself?" Lynette looked around the cabin walls, noticing there were geodes built in the walls at seemingly random places: amethyst, sapphires, blue crystals, and what looked like fluorite. Lynette was amazed at the ingenuity he must have had to do all this. Duke smiled and asked, "Have you seen the loft yet?" "No," Melody replied. Duke took Melody's hand, leading her up the 12 semicircle steps leading to the loft. Each step was made of the same kind of stone, but seemed to be carved right out of the mountain. Thor and Lynette followed. Everyone was amazed at the size of the upper room. It was at least 18 feet tall and went deep into the mountain. The walls were of polished stone, a little different from the stones downstairs, and the ceiling was made from logs. The logs were perfectly shaped to form a self-supporting arch. Duke laughed. "Ha! Yeah, this is equipped with all the modern conveniences." Behind a small wall was a sink with water going into the basin, and then water flowing into a commode. Here again, there was what appeared to be pipes, but these were not pipes, but holes made into the stone to take the wastewater some unknown location. The pipes built into the wall reminded Lynette of the semicircular stone carvings of the many different ancient sites across the world. There is no way that this could be done with hammer and chisel. Some advanced technology must have been used, and some of these things reminded her of the marvel of Pumapunku. Melody was amazed at the ingenuity it must have taken to design and make this. How could one man do all this all by himself, she asked herself. Lynette stood on top of the loft and looked to the back and saw the logs go from the mountain to the front of the house. They had to be at least 100 feet long. Where did these logs come from? There was no trees in this area that grew this tall and so straight. Then Lynette looked down the stairs to see the stone walls again. The whole wall was visible from a different perspective. She saw 2 stained glass windows, one on either side of the front door. Each window was like the ones by the fireplace, 10 feet tall, 5 feet wide, with some mysterious geometric figures in the stained glass she had never seen before. Whispering to herself, "I'm a professor of physics. I have a PhD, and this makes no sense to me at all." There was something that bothered her. She was missing something. Looking a little closer, it occurred to her there was a pattern, several patterns. The geodes in the wall looked like they simulated the placing of 5 different constellations: Canistor Major, Cancer Minor, Lepus. She wondered what the other 7 geodes were meaning to represent. She had a passing thought. Constellation of Sirius and the Pleiadians? That also was an interesting puzzle. She looked a little closer, and she thought she saw the image of the flower of life. Duke smiled and said, "I have something else to show you." He walked down the stairs to a large chest, using the same keys to open the front door and used them to open the chest locks. Inserting the keys into the locks, they clicked several times, releasing the contents. The hinges creaked as Duke opened the lid. Odd-looking medallions came into view, each medallion set in its separate holder. Duke moved a smaller wooden box out of the way as he reached for the first medallion. The wooden box rattled like there were small stones in it. Without thinking, Duke put the box aside and chose a medallion. Melody saw the box and wondered what was in it and picked it up. Looking at Duke, she said, "May I look in here?" "Sure, help yourself," Duke said. Melody watched as the wooden cover released its hold in the box. 5 stones showed: pink, green, blue, black, and a strange color she had never seen before. What looked like a stone of black, flaked obsidian. Another blue stone of what looked like Larimer. A third stone of pink sapphire. Another odd-looking aqua green that she thought was probably moldavite. And one more, she had no idea what it was, but it didn't look like anything she had ever seen before. It was a coarse, yellowish, brown-black with streaks of silvery gray running through it. And yet, she moved the stone in the light. It seemed to almost vanish. Melody put the stones back in the box to join the others. She made a mental note of the stones and went to join the others again. Inside the chest was covered with different colored felt wood shelves with 24 slots, 12 in front and 12 in back. 6 were empty, 3 in front and 3 in back. The empty slots appeared to break up pairs. Each slot was identified with a small metal picture of something which looked like a strange word or symbol. Each holder had a golden medallion, or a medallion with a gold core, and on the core was an insignia which matched the slot it came from. And the opposite medallion, it was paired with it, covered with a strange smooth cloth with gold edges. Each medallion was about 6 inches across, 2 inches thick in the middle, and thinner on the edges, weighed about 10 pounds each. Duke carefully lifted one and handed it to Melody, then handed one to Lynette, and then one to Thor. Duke sat back and watched as they inspected the medallions. Melody commented about the 2 faces on the front, that one face had 2 sets of teeth, looked like a warrior, and the other a normal face like a farmer. Melody heard a strange sound, a hum, buzzing of a musical tone she had heard before in a laboratory somewhere. She was getting a little dizzy as her medallion rested in her hands. Carefully looking at it, she turned it over again and again. It felt heavy, felt smooth, was that beautiful, yellowish color of gold. Sitting down, wondering what was going on, she heard tones in her head, not her ears. Looking at Lynette, she was acting the same way, woozy, stumbling a bit, and not able to keep her balance very well. "What's going on?" Lynette whispered. "I remember hearing something like this in an experiment, a special cymatics experiment." I'm not exactly sure, Melody whispered. I would need some instruments to be able to check, but it seems to me that these, whatever these are, have an electrical charge that is affecting our bodies, mainly our brain. I would guess that our prefrontal lobes and pineal glands. See, I am a neuroscience nurse. I work with doctors who analyze the brain. There are many mysteries about our brain and mind. One thing I do know is many doctors say we only use 5% of our brains. The difference is that we all use a different 5%. Working with a neuropathologist who studies the brain and diseases of the brain and nervous system, I've seen symptoms like this before. One more thing we are beginning to realize is that only 25% of our DNA is active. So that understanding that, we have to ask ourselves, what if 75% was active? What could we do? We do not know if the unused DNA would give us a different form of body or different functions like stronger electricity production. Thorne gave her a questioning look, not sure what she was talking about. What do you mean? Melody had a professional expression on her face as she continued. Our bodies are bioelectrical. Our heart and brain create electricity through chemical reactions. The human body can create as much as 100 watts. The universe is electrical. What if we could modulate the electricity to change the environment around us? What could we do? I feel a buzzing in the middle of my brain, like my pineal gland is getting a boost of power. I can feel my mind focusing sharper. I see things I was not able to before. It is like I can see the 4 dimensions, not just 3. Maybe not a 4th dimension. Maybe an upper and lower dimensions. Something's different than what we were used to. I know that. Yeah, Lynette agreed, as she went from looking to the medallions in her hand. My head does feel funny, like something's changing, but I don't know what. Lynette commented about the solar system on the back of the medallion. It had 12 planets. Thor held his medallion away from him to get a better look. Frustrated, he had to hold the artifact so far away from him to really see it well. He thought to himself, I've never been farsighted before. I have a 20/20 vision. That's why I'm still in the military, he commented. Look at the scenes behind the faces and see how strange it looks. It looks like a lush tropical forest with gigantic foliage, not like our environment. He could see every detail, indentation, and mark on the medallion. He could see things that no one else saw. They swapped medallions, each inspecting other ones. Everyone noticed something different. The faces, the planets, the scenery behind the fingers. Lynette wondered if the differing locations of the planets were representing special historical times of the universe. Lynette took one medallion and walked around the cabin. She felt dizzy but kept going. Looking up at the geodes on the wall, she noticed something unusual. The geodes she was looking at directly started to glow a hue of green and blue like a fine tourmaline and alexandrite. She put one medallion down, getting another, walking around more. Other geodes started to glow yellow like topaz. How could this be? She whispered to herself. She wanted to think about it for a while and did not mention it to the others. Lynette looked at Duke and asked, What are those other medallions for? They look like they're covered in some kind of cloth. It seems to have a strange form of writing on them also. Duke looked at Lynette and said, I really don't know. Grandpa always told me that those are very dangerous, and we were to never, and he meant never, put the 2 medallions together. Grandpa would tell me one day, but that day never came. He did say one time that when they were matched up together with their pairs, the consequences were drastic. I never really understood what he meant by that. Duke looked at Melody. Let's make us something to eat. Duke put the large kettle over the fire, filled it with water. Looking at the supplies they had brought, everyone decided to have a fast, easy-to-fix hobo stewed vegetables with no meat. Duke and Melody shared glances of admiration as they were silently working together, cutting fresh vegetables, seasoning the soup with fresh carrots, onions, celery, garlic, and potatoes. Melody was still feeling the effects of touching the medallion. Her head was swimming a little and in a slight fog, yet everything else was clearer than she had ever remembered. Melody looked at Lynette and asked, "Do you feel fuzzy?" "Well," Lynette whispered, "yes, but no. It's the strangest thing. I feel fuzzy, but everything is crisper than I can ever remember. It's like I can almost see in 4 dimensions, which I've never noticed before." Melody nodded her head in agreement. "I understand. I hear things, I see things, I feel things like I've never experienced before. It's like I can sense that we are more alive, only on a different level. I can see things that I have never imagined, like the flow of air in the room or the path of molecules." "Yes," Lynette agreed. "You're right. I see that too, now that you mention it." Duke saw Melody stumbling a little and asked, "Well, what's wrong?" "I just don't feel good," Melody whispered. "Okay," Duke said. "I know what to do." He walked back to the chest, reaching for the box Melody saw before. He chose the rose quartz and gave it to Melody. Melody looked at it. Then her head started to clear. "Wow, what is this?" she asked. "Well," Duke whispered, "I'm not sure, but when Grandpa had that kind of feeling, he held one of those stones. Matter of fact, he had it in his pocket all the time. This is one of the reasons the key's handles are covered in amethyst. When Grandpa was thinking, he would reach into his pocket to touch the stone. I always carried one when I was here. Then before I left for home, Grandpa would have me give it back. Then he handed one to Lynette and to Thor. The other 3 were standing looking at the gems while Duke set the smaller metal pot of food into the cauldron of boiling water. The smaller pot of stew came to boil quickly. Duke laughed and said, "Grandpa always cooked this way. He said, 'Food just seems to taste better.'" Duke set the table with plastic silverware, plates, and plastic cups as the meal cooked. "Do you feel a little different?" Lynette whispered to Thor. "Yeah," he answered. "Not bad, not good, just different. Like I can see clearer, deeper, crisper. There is a ringing in my ears, but it's not in my ears, it's in my head." Lynette nodded her head. "Yeah, same here. I understand." Both fondled the crystal Duke had given them. The air quickly filled with the aroma of the savory stew, an aroma of warmth and comfort. Melody announced, "Dinner is ready."